All right, this is, I believe, the fifth interview I've put up. This is with Piggyman, so we're going to watch him demolishing me in the Squid Reunion semifinals once again, if you haven't watched that video. The game I'm putting up is the one where he beat me, though I thought the first game was really interesting too, where I was just so sure I was winning, and I'm just oozing confidence and like, aha, I've won, all that. And then he finds a tie because he's very good. So here's my interview with Piggyman. And games will be coming 2 days after this video comes out. How would you describe your triple triad play or style? I'm a very defensive player by nature. I usually prioritize safety and structurally sound positions above all. When I win against a tough opponent, I find it's often through attrition. My matches will typically have multiple ties before arriving at a decisive result. I consider myself pretty good at creating advantages for myself, though I don't always fully capitalize on them. I yearn to be a more dynamic player like Dalial or Akiyama, but it's hard to go against my defensive instincts. Who is your most interesting opponent? I have a hard time remembering any of my games from back in the day, so I can only base this off the games I've played since the return of TTA. With that said, I would say Akiyama has been the most interesting opponent for me. He's very creative and often plays in unorthodox squares that feel like they shouldn't work but actually do. I would also give an honorable mention to Vialva, with whom I've had some very exciting games. If you haven't, when I did the interview with Vialva, I did a video of his games after, but then he played this really fun sequence of games against Piggy after that, or this one specifically really fun game, and I'd go check that one out because that game's a lot of fun. And we've already, I think there's videos of Piggy playing Akiyama already in videos, but more coming. Who is your toughest opponent? I don't think I've ever beaten Great Sephiroth. I remember feeling especially crushed after losing to him in the semi-finals of SE Sid. That was the furthest I had ever made it into a big tournament up to that point in my TTA career, and I finally felt like I was becoming a force to be reckoned with. I faced several other incredibly tough opponents, including Delial Seto was up in Yojimbo, but for some reason, the losses to Great Sephiroth stand out as particularly ego-deflating. What formation or move type do you like more than other players do? This can be for either open or closed, or answer for both. I wouldn't say I have a particular formation that I gravitate to in open. What I play is very dependent on my hand. I've made hands with dedicated corner, center, and side starters. In closed, I actually love setting up X formations. They don't happen super often, but they're very exciting, and they're typically very advantageous for the first turn player. Otherwise, the standard QT-SC formations do the trick. I do think Piggy lands in formations quite a bit, as good players should. Interestingly, we will see him in the video in 2 days, defending the X position as the second turn player. What formations or move type do you like less than other players do? I don't know if I necessarily like these less than other players, but when I'm second turn and closed, I often try to avoid ending up in a QT, S, or Z formation. At best, they typically guarantee a safe square for the opponent, and at worst, they open you up to a multitude of disastrous combos. Favorite way to meet a corner starter, a side starter, a center starter? It very much depends on the hands, but generally speaking, I think adjacent corners are a strong reply to corner starters. Playing in the center against a corner starter is a bit riskier, but it's a lot of fun as it creates very volatile positions. Against side starters, I always look for safety in one of the adjacent corners first. Otherwise, I think an opposite corner is a solid retort. Against a center starter, I just ask them to pass me whatever they're smoking. Yeah, I agree with all of this. I'm on board with the entirety of it. I think this is a very good sequence of kind of first things to look at against everything. I do think it's interesting that Piggy says against, center starters is this kind of ridiculous thing, or this thing that you gotta be high to do. When in fact, Piggy is most famous for a hand that was a center starter. But hand games and random games are quite different, and I think hand game center starters are rarely going to be one of the better options, though I did make a video arguing for them in my center attack videos. Do you have a preferred starter type? Does that change between random and hand games? I generally start in corners. It's usually what feels most natural, and it leads to more predictable setups. I find center starters a bit clumsy unless the hand was specifically designed to have one, in which case they can be quite powerful. I think side starters are interesting, but they're outside of my comfort zone, so I rarely end up playing them. As I'll mention in the next video in more detail, The numbers I was keeping on players that I got lazy about updating, but through kind of early mid-December, had Piggy as the player best at starters of anyone on the site. So I think if you're looking to be a better player at starting games, following what Piggy does and what he thinks is a very good place to start. And I think in general the kind of center starters can work if the hand is set up to do so, but are unlikely to from just a random or a hand not designed to do so. Side starters are outside of his comfort zone, but I think for good reason. I think most of the time, most players should be playing corner starters. I think, if you're playing corner starters less than half the time, that's far too little, and the correct point in randoms is probably, on most rule sets, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4, somewhere in that kind of range. Actually, we can find out. With the stats I have, which again, incomplete sample, didn't keep it updated, what percentage of the time does Piggy play corner starters in random games? I have this. Just give me a moment. And we're scrolling. Corner starter rate. I have Piggy at 85%. For reference, just to have a sense of who's in that ballpark, I'm at 86% corner starters. Deli is at 94. Doom Train is at 83. Tezuka is at 87. If you're looking to be inspired by players with lower corner starter rates, Turds is at 62. Akiyama is at 66. Midas is at 67. Chickanee's at 70. I would say, in general, just giving a quick scan of this, kind of an odd thing to say, but I would say the top-end Brotherhood of Seed players, including Seto as well, tend to have lower corner starter rates than the top-end non-Brotherhood of Seed players. And on average, if someone is a top-end player, you can have a pretty good prediction of whether their starter rate is closer to 2/3 or more like higher than 3/4, whether or not they're a Brotherhood of Seed member. In randoms. Alright, returning to this. Does it change between open and closed? Not particularly. I'd say I'm more willing to play a center starter in closed than in open, as it allows me to have a lot of control over the formation of the game, and I think solid positional play is the key to success in closed. With that said, I'm still more likely to start in a corner. Yeah, I'm basically the same, except I'm more likely to start in the center than a corner in most closed sets. Depends on if combo's on. Non-combo, I will start corners. What is your proudest triple triad moment? This isn't so much a specific moment as a stretch of time, but in 2011, I was able to make back-to-back semifinals in Rufus and Ward, losing both times to the eventual winners, was up and Seto respectively. I remember feeling a great amount of joy from having gotten so far in both tournaments. Alright, we can bring this up. So Piggy has this run. It's 2011. Again, this will take me a moment to find, but I know where it should be. Piggyman. Yeah, so he has a quarterfinals in TTAC 8. I guess that would be 2010. Then some goes out early in a Rhinoa tournament, and then gets a semifinals in Rufus, a semifinals in Ward, and yeah, just a really, really nice run of 3 icons in about 4 tournaments, and 2 of them being semifinals runs. And these were 6-round tournaments. These weren't when it had gotten shorter. Should Deli all be banned? Yes or absolutely? I plead the fifth, the coward's answer. Should Elemental be abolished? Yes or immediately? While I agree with the sentiment that Elemental should not be used in serious tournament play, I do think it's a fun rule in casual play. I especially enjoy closed RE, which I would even go as far as to call my favorite rule set for casual play. A lot of people like the RE. A lot of people do. It's very suspicious. What clan or clans will always have a place in your heart? Elites was my first clan, and I spent a number of years there. I joined as a teenager and made many good friends there. When I would return from classes in high school, I would often spend hours playing TTA and chatting with my clanmates. Elites was an important part of my social life as an adolescent. I also joined a few other clans and had good experiences with those as well, but Elites was where I made the most memories. Although Elites is no more, I'm happy to be able to continue my triple triad experience as a member of Avalanche today. I would have been shocked if Piggy had mentioned any other clan. He was such an important part of Elites. With time as a co-leader or leader, with time as just the joyous part of the chat there. Elites is also one of the clans in my heart, but it primarily is so because of Piggy. I think most of the other people I really got along well with in Elites. I had other clans or chat rooms that I also shared with them. And so for me, Piggy it's not just that Piggy is a really important part of Elites, it's that Piggy is like the defining part of that clan. And it was a really enjoyable clan for me to be part of too. You could also, of course, argue Yoshikin is the defining member, but I'm going to hot take and say it's Piggyman. Player you think is most underrated? Though, obviously, Yoshi was incredibly important in forming that clan, and was a really tremendously successful clan, given that a lot of clans were started by elite players, and Yoshi, though he had periods where he played well, was not an elite player, and it was also a clan that was started later and not by someone who had, led famous clans of the past. And yet was just this remarkably fun place, successful place to be, and did so without being a clan that wasn't also like competitive. They were clearly competitive in clan events. They fielded strong teams, usually of newer players, while being a really fun place to be. And Yoshi and Piggy did a phenomenal job of making that the case. Player you think is most underrated? I think Sir Smokes is a phenomenal player who isn't often touted as a top-tier player, though I think he's definitely deserving of consideration as one of the greatest. I believe I ranked him 16th of all time. I will claim it's not me doing the underrating, but maybe he should be higher. I think I had him 17th, actually. Shh. Another player that comes to mind is D. I think I had D 18th? He wasn't around for that long, so I don't think many people remember him, but he was a terrifying opponent to face. Who are your top 3 to 5 picks for GOAT? The 5 that immediately come to mind for me are, in no order, Coward, Delial, Great Sephiroth, Seto, Was Up, and Yojimbo. I wasn't around in the era of Doc Evil, so I never got to witness or appreciate his talent, but I know from others that his name belongs in the conversation. I think Akiyama is a modern honorable mention, too. Yeah. Can't argue with any of that. One of the cool things of the site returning is hopefully we're going to get to see Akiyama play another 5-10 tournaments. And so we'll go from a sample of like 7 or 8 to a sample of, 15 or whatever. And that's going to be starting to get into the range where he won't have played that many fewer tournaments as, maybe, I'm presumably going to keep playing, but like won't have played that many fewer tournaments to like a Nightwish and as many as a Sujiro, right? And once he's in that group, it'll be a lot easier to see how his achievements stack up. And so as Triple Triad's resident historian, I am very curious to see where Akiyama, I think, lands in that conversation. When did you start playing, and what was your favorite era? I can't remember precisely when I started playing, but it was probably around 2006-07. My favorite era was probably around 2009. The site was booming at that time, and I visited the chat rooms and the forums on a daily basis. I think this was around the time when I started contributing to Occult Fan, which was a Triple Triad newsletter made by the community with columns on all sorts of topics, and making articles for Occult Fan brought me a lot of joy. Favorite rule set or sets? I really enjoy making hands, so any rule set that offers interesting possibilities for hand making is right up my alley. I'm particularly fascinated by total level rule sets, wherein you have a wide range of levels to choose from, but the sum of the levels of your cards can't exceed a certain value, as they often present a plethora of options on how to construct your hands, and it's not always obvious what the best way to go is. Generally, the less I can predict what my opponent's hand will look like, the more fun I find the rule set. As mentioned before, I also love closed RE when I just want some mindless entertainment. Yeah, let us use this moment to push for trying some total level rule sets in official tournaments, because I think I was messing around with them in the tournaments I ran before TTA returned, and I really thought the 4 level divide gave you a ton of options of like kind of like level 3 through 6, your total level. So if the average level there is 4.5, 4.5 times 5 is 22.5. Usually I found it worked a little better if you set the total level slightly below that. So, total levels 3 through 6, total level 22, maybe 21, maybe 23. By tweaking that a little, you are going to change what's optimal quite a bit. Something like that. Or you can do that with any set, 5 through 8, again, 6.5 times 5, subtract 1 or 2, or round down. I think you get really interesting sets. Want to be a little careful about what the max levels are. Like, I suspect 3 through 6 works better for this than, say, 1 through 4 would. It's interesting when there's kind of just one jump in max number available. Or not a massive jump, and also not something where level 1s are just so useless against higher level cards quite often. So anyway, it can go a bunch of ways, but I really would love to see that kind of set employed in official tournaments or in more events. Have you met any other Triple Triad players in person? I've had the pleasure of meeting 2 fellow TTA members. I met Foyer once, since we both live in Montreal, and we went to a Korean restaurant together. I remember ordering something that was so spicy that I couldn't even get through half the bowl before having to stop. We chatted for hours and had a nice time. I also met Strike, a member of Elites back in the day. We'd become pretty close and started playing games besides TTA together. I took a 30-hour bus ride down to Georgia to meet him, and I spent a week over there. I tried catfish and grits for the first time with him. We did a bunch of gaming together. Meeting both of them were great experiences, and I'd be thrilled to get the chance to meet more folks from TTA. Oh, that's awesome. I love hearing when people have actually met each other, and yeah, Strike could be a nice person to see back. Yeah, I like it. What is your biggest weakness as a player? You can evade the question if you think it's targetable. I think my biggest weaknesses are my slower calculation speed and my impatience. When combined, these 2 factors will often lead me to making a move that just feels good without delving deeper to verify if it really is a good move or not. My gut instincts are usually based on solid heuristics, but I could probably be an even better player if I was able to crunch the numbers faster. Is there another question I haven't asked you'd like to answer? My favorite card is... I'm pausing so in the audience you can correctly fill in the answer. Oh, I'm so tempted to troll and say FF7 Ghost Ship, but no. His favorite card is FF Tactics' Galagros, as he is very well known for. It is a shame that when... which deck was it? It was a King Behemoth card. Was it the FF7 one? I don't think so. But when the 6717 was removed as a level 5 number combo, and Piggy's famous hand became not feasible and not usable anymore because the level 5 was changed away. But he had this hand, which we'll briefly end on, where, he'd stick Galagros in 5, this 5/6/5/6, and it was flanked by 7/6/6/1 and 7/1/6/6, which, could play really... oftentimes he'd specifically play to fill that middle column, and then they could just dominate the wings. But he also wasn't... I think he did a really nice job of not being kind of set in stone on the game plan. And very often he would use one of them early, understanding that having one of them in either 2 or 8 naturally set up the other one. And often putting down one didn't mean, you lost these 2 cards that play well together. It meant you started setting up the other one. And he did a nice job of finding the spots where one should be expended early, or both should be, but also where you want to hold on to both. Then there was 7/1/7/1. Now, notably, he usually played this set with plus wall off. So after a card in 5 was played, 7/1/7/1 already potentially has safety in 4 or 6. And so that could be a useful threat to have. A lot of people will play 7/6/6s or 7/7 corners, but once 5 is blocked, 7/7 side to sides are often where safety is going to most easily be found with plus wall off. And having a 7/7 up down that also with its 1 to the sides could play really well with the 7/6/6/1s was a very powerful fit. But then the last card for the hand was 6/7/1/7, which perhaps doesn't seem as natural a fit, but really pulled everything together nicely. It was a threat to be safe in 2 or 8 after his starter in 5, because again, 7's up or down or 7's side to side naturally have safety with plus wall off once 5 is occupied. And often, he'd go 5, someone would say go in 7, and 6-7-1-7 would land in 2. The other thing it did was by having the 7s left and right, the 7-1-6-6s often suddenly gained ability through plus to be able to cover 7s. And so often when that was down, suddenly things just lined up really nicely for the hand to work. And he did a wonderful job with it. So that was the FF Tactics Galagros hand. It is either, depending on your viewpoint, I think the most or second most famous hand in Triple Triad history, unless there were some really well-known ones in the early 2000s, the early mid-2000s. But I think it's between Piggy's really wonderful hand and Halo Carnasso's slightly appalling hand, which is a weird rivalry given that Piggy absolutely does not like what Haley Carnasso does. So, anywho, on that happy note, we'll end this interview. There will be games coming with him in a couple days, and actually I have a couple more recorded games of at least one other video recording of Piggy playing games coming soon as well. So hopefully we'll get to enjoy his style and his ability. And also, if I end the video now, you won't see me lose this game. So actually, let's make sure you do. Skip ahead a little. Piggy plays the correct move in 6, and I am doomed. And let's just make sure it ends. And there it is. I lose. And yeah, so that's Piggy. This is the 5th interview. The next interview will be an old timer. And the interview after that will be another old timer. So we're going to be going back into TT history. People who spent most of their time on the site pre, say, 2008. So the next 2 are going to be like that. Not sure who the one after that's going to be. If you want it to be you, let me know. I'm open to suggestions on this. And cheers. See you next time.